ad hoc committee meeting for the purpose of discussing the cell tower at Richter Park, beginning at 6:45 on Wednesday evening, June 22nd, in the caucus room, 3rd floor, City Hall. Present at the meeting are myself, Councilman Jack Knapp, Chairman. We have Councilman Phil Cola and Councilman Dwayne Perkins also on this committee. We have ex officio members Mary Teicholz, ex officio member Peter Nero, ex officio Ben Chianese, and ex officio Joe Coward. Oh, and Don Taylor.
That was subtle.
The Bill Gates line.
I can always stand up, but that's...
Also present we have Corporation Counsel Les Pinter. We have the Director of Planning, Dennis Alpern. The Mayor's Office is not present with us this evening. And we have representatives from the Richter Park Authority. Maria Sanchin, I understand her daughter's graduating this evening, so she can't make it. We have with us Robert Everhard, the Chairman, John Priola, and Bill Totten, also members of the Richter Park Authority. The purpose of this committee is to determine, of course, are we going to be moving forward with allowing the Richter Park Authority to move forward with the possibility of putting up a cell tower on their property. We have a letter here from the mayor, which I'll read into the record, dated January 25th. The honorable members of the City Council of the City of Danbury, dear council members, I've received a letter from Richter Park General Manager Mary Sanchin and Richter Park Authority regarding placement of a cell tower facility on authority land. I ask for your recognition and authorization for the Richter Park Authority to inquire into the placement of such a cell tower facility at a location yet to be determined on its lands. The authority voted unanimously at its January 20th meeting to pursue your permission. Thanks for your consideration. Sincerely, Mark Bell. And I also, once that happened, what triggers off procedurally is it comes before the council. This ad hoc committee was formed. Also, the Planning Commission was asked for their position on this, their report on this, and I'll read their report into the record. It's to the Mayor Mark Belton from the Planning Commission, reference 824 referral February 2011 City Council Agenda Item 2, request to consider the placement of cell tower facility at Richter Park facility on authority land in a location yet to be determined. The Planning Commission has received the request from the City Council for a report pursuant to Connecticut Statute Section 824 regarding the above referenced item. At the February 16, 2011 meeting, the Planning Commission made a motion to give a positive recommendation. This motion was defeated with a 2-2 vote. The Commission discussed entertaining a motion for a negative recommendation, but each of the members said they had no intention of changing their vote. After much discussion, it was decided to send them a memo stating that they could not agree on a recommendation based on limited information being provided to them. And again, we'll sit here and we'll discuss the towers, the significance of having a tower there. I know you've got site plans or site locations before us that we'll definitely take into consideration. I know, having met with Maria, she went through pretty much everything with me that she's seen so far. Again, we're not here to decide, are you putting up a cell tower or are you not? We're here to decide, are you going to have the authority to move forward and pursue that? So once that happens, then it would all have to come back to us anyhow for city approval. So with that being said, I'm going to call upon one of you. I would guess we'll go to our chairman, Robert, and if you could just give us a brief overview of the plans of the authority.
Actually, I'm probably going to defer because to John, who's been more involved and has that experience in the private sector with cell towers, and he's the one who planted the seed, and then Maria carried it forward. So if John doesn't mind, he's our treasurer.
Okay.
There's a master plan out there for Richter Park that requires quite a bit of money to go through with some of the things that are recommended. And in brainstorming and trying to come up with ideas in terms of how we could fund some of those improvements to the park, it occurred to me that possibly a cell tower on the property would be a great way to generate some revenue. In my position where I work, we have worked with 4 different cell companies and we have put 4 towers on our roof. So I understand what the economics of it can be and the impact that it could mean to Richter Park. So I spoke with Maria about it and just asked her to pursue what the possibilities would be. She contacted a few of the companies, we went through the process, and we came to the point where we want to pursue what the possibilities are of doing that. And one of the things required us to come here, I guess, to request permission to continue that pursuit.
I just want to interject, actually, it was actually, even with us even getting to that point, the various cell phone tower companies have said they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in other locations with towns, and then find out the town itself wouldn't let them do it after they went through all of it. So it was not only our idea, it was their idea that we get city's blessing before we do anything further.
Okay. Questions?
So you want a notice to proceed.
I'm sorry?
You want basically a notice to proceed.
Correct. Authorization.
Yeah. How much money do you think Richter Park can acquire on a cell tower? And have you been approached by a company?
We've approached them.
And what kind of reaction?
They're very interested.
They are interested.
Very interested.
It's my knowledge, Dennis, that there's several zones up there that are dead zones for cell phones. In that general area. So that's one of the reasons why the cell companies, in talking to Maria, that's one of the reasons why the cell companies are so anxious to move forward into that area.
And any estimate on revenue?
Based upon my experience, I could say the revenue would average per lease $2,500 a month. You then also have the possibility of getting the leases bought out, basically getting the cash up front. And those could be several hundreds of thousands of dollars each. So depending on how many companies you're able to put on the tower, you can multiply that 2, 3, or 4 times.
And I don't want to interrupt your process, but I just kind of, when John says something I think if I could follow up with John, I think an important point too is that the mayor's office had come to us and asked us to, and as you probably know, I don't know who's been on the council at the time, but authorized money to be given to us to have this master plan drawn up. And John may recall the estimate at that time to do everything, just to give an idea to everybody, how much it cost to even attempt to do what's called for in the master plan.
Was how many millions?
$10 million, $10 million. And obviously, in this economic climate, we're just struggling to, operate the course anymore. It's not like the old days where they had money to spend. They don't have the money anymore. And obviously, we know the city's not in good shape in terms. No city in the country is in good shape for municipality or state or federal. So we're trying to do whatever we can, think of ways to raise revenue to keep us going forward and being able to do some of those master plans, which leads to, if one of the early things is a driving range, and that trip, like the city of Stamford, they net, I think they gross $800,000. Now they have a double decker. We'll never have the facilities to do that. But on our master plan, it shows for relocation of the 10th pole and building of a driving range. And in Stamford, where they have a double decker open 365 days a year, they gross, I think, $800,000 just from the driving range with $200,000 in cost. So you can see that one thing kind of leads to another to build up revenue. So this was a starting point. And that's, I just wanted to project that at this point in time.
Thank you. Phil?
Do you have an estimate as to how high this tower is going to be?
That I wasn't really, that was more Maria's, and Maria, unfortunately, she couldn't be here tonight. I have no clue how high they would
It
be.
could be as high as 20 feet. That's a lot of height.
Can I say something?
If I could, I just want to go to my council members first, and let them ask their questions, and then you're on the committee. Go.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Through you, I'm not really sure who can handle this question, but in the letter that you just wrote into the record, planning commission was a 2-2 deadlock. And they also cited concerns of limited information. How much more information do we have here today than they had that day? We don't know how tall the towers will be. We're not exactly sure how much the revenue stream will be. How much more information do we have today than they had that February?
Well, I believe, can I answer that?
Sure.
I believe that Maria had sent myself and Bill and members of the committee an email that had kind of like a summary, executive summary, with some pictures and some photos of possible sites with possible exhibits of how a tower might look. And then also a report from the American Cancer Society talking about. So I would say there's a lot more information available today than there was when the Planning Commission met. I was at that meeting when the Planning Commission met. And again, we're not looking for approval to do a tower. We're just looking for approval to pursue the possibility.
In my conversations with Maria, there's 3 different locations that they had looked at for the tower. 2 of them didn't seem feasible because of wetlands. The other one was the one by the tennis courts, which my copy here is not all that great. I think you got a better look at it there. Just I'll let you know which one it is. It was the one. B is the one. B is preferable. Right. B was the preferable location. The way it was explained to me, and I believe, Mr. Beaver, you the neighbor across the street, or
I am the neighbor closest to B. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
Okay.
So that was there was a household there, which is Mr. Beaver's, and then the next nearest household is in the Hack region, which is down around the corner. But again, this is all preliminary to what we're here to really vote on tonight. That is to allow them to pursue it. They've still got to come back to us for any approvals, for any changes they make. This is going to require financing. It's going to require leases. So they'll be back before us before any of that stuff goes
Just one more
through.
question, to the chair. How far away is that particular B location from that? What's that, Hack River? Just out of curiosity.
250 yards.
Can you drive it that far?
Yes. 3
No chance.
From the road, from there. Mr. Cheney's.
So, a couple questions. Is going back with Stanley Richter, when he gifted the property to the city, what was his donor right? What did he give? What did he restrict? What was the purpose of Richter Park?
Recreational, largely. I have to look at the deed, originally 1970, whatever it was.
Because I think we're kind of moving away from what the original intent is. You know, before we allow anything to proceed, the exception would be, does the city want a cell tower on Richter Park? And going back to the original donor, does he would want a cell tower on Richter Park? We all know what happens with cell towers. We had it up on Shelf Rock. There's a big issue. We had it with Marjorie Reservoir. We had a big issue there. Stanley Rock, big issue. Van Hack is no different. And for those people out there with a neighbor here, I'm sure he's very concerned with this. So are we giving to say, yes, we would say you could proceed with this. So we're kind of like giving him the go-ahead of look into this, whether or not we want a cell tower on Richter Park, literally 100 feet from the road, either be 200 feet or 100 feet where it looks like a tree or whatever. You know, I think we're opening ourselves up to a big can of worms here. This is what we want. And if we allow it on Richter Park, why don't we allow it on Kenwood Park or Hatters Park? Where does it end? So I think the committee has to look at what's the intention here. Where do we want to go? I mean, Richter Park is designed for recreational use. It's not designed to have, in my opinion, not to have a cell tower on it. And I know golf courses around the country are having very difficult time maintaining revenue because no one's been involved now with. You know, there was a report on the radio last week about municipal courses closing. People just are not playing any longer. You know, I don't know what the Richter Park is now, because we haven't gotten any financial reports in a while from Richter Park. So we really don't know what your financial situation is regarding how many people are playing, or is the grounds going down or up. We have no idea. So whether or not it's feasible, well, you need neither a cell tower, whether you want to finance your 10-year plan, and that's going to require a lot more planning than this committee's going to be doing. And the Friends of Richter, have they been approached with this idea? What's their comment on this? Because last time when you did the 10-year plan, they had a big say with Richter House. But when you planned on tearing it down, they had a big say on that, and that started a lot of commotion. So I think before we give any kind of blessing, I think we need to have everybody's opinion here, whether this is where we want to take it to the next step, so even you go approaching them, because right now, I don't see that's the way the city wants to go.
And that would come out at our council meeting when it comes time to vote. I'm sure they would show up and voice their opinion on it. So,
Council as a whole.
Council as a whole, yeah. I mean, tonight, whether we vote to give a positive recommendation or negative recommendation, it still comes before us at the next council meeting.
I understand.
So they'll have their opportunity there.
I can answer, at least if you may, I can answer one of Mr. Chinesi's thing that and some to Les checking it out, but I can assure you this came up so many times, that specifically the only use in the deed was recreational purposes. It wasn't, there was, when they were doing the master plan, people were getting up and said it talked about the arts, it talked about this, it was for recreational purposes. And there's a difference between passive and, as you well know, and where you don't, like Brookfield seems to like to buy open space and not let you do anything on it, where other towns let you have soccer fields and things like that. And this, in the past, your forefathers led us to do a golf course. And you should know, I'm sure you know if you don't know, that when they created it under the ordinance, we already have a lot of inherent powers already. We don't, like, for example, we can borrow, we can go out the bond, we don't need your approval. We can construct facilities, we don't need your approval. I'm only putting that out because it's already in the ordinance. And what we're doing, though, is something that, in other words, we still have to do planning, but we're trying to get your blessing because we don't want anybody later on coming. So that's why we're here. But certain powers we already have and based on city ordinance without having to come back to the city council.
So to follow up on that, so you can do this without our blessing.
No, I didn't say that. I'm saying, because this is a little bit different because it's a cell tower. But like when we rent the restaurant out, for example, was that the intent at the time? The golf course, was that the intent? I mean, we have a board member from the Richter family who was on this, though she probably stopped showing up and resigned about 3 or 4 years ago. Ann Williams, who was that relative of the niece of Mrs. Richter, and everything up to that point. We didn't discuss cell towers, but there was never an issue with her up to that point with anything we did up at Richter Park. And I've been on the board for 14 years, so I kind of have a pretty good memory of what took place with the family Richter. So, yeah, we wouldn't be here if we didn't think we needed it. We're here to cooperate with the city of Inver, that's all.
Mr. Cobb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a couple of statements. Part of it has to do with what Mr. Cheney said, and part of what has to do with what John said. Over these past several years, with things being as difficult as they are financially, the mayor and the council has been going to our agencies throughout the city and saying, look, we need you to become more self-sustainable. We need you to not rely on taxpayers. And I'm not saying that Richter does assert at this point, but we're asking these authorities and agencies, and we've actually created the IVES Authority to do that, and we've fed them seed money, and we're hoping to get them to have enough of a clout in the system that they can sustain on their own and provide quality of life enhancements for the city of Danbury. And we're asking the same thing of Richter Park here. We're asking them to be creative and to be inventive and look at ways to sustain. Now, Mr. Cheney said that public golf courses, because of low play, are closing throughout the nation. That's the last thing I think Stanley Richter would have wanted in Richter Park. So, we're asking them and all other agencies in the city to be creative, and I think that they're coming back with a viable possibility to earn some money to help implement their master plan, which will help enhance their play, which will help enhance that park to continue to grow and develop and stay the jewel that it is here in Danbury. And I think that tonight's request for us to just say we would entertain this or we wouldn't, we just absolutely would not entertain this is what this is about, so that they can get a clear vision, go back to some of these cell tower companies and say, okay, look, the committee thinks that they would go ahead and approve this contingently on what you're going to present back to us. Not saying that we're going to say yes, but we need to give you the opportunity so that you don't spend, listen, we do it all the time in sewer projects. We invest $100,000 in a sewer project that in the end ultimately gets voted down, and we just spent $100,000 of taxpayers' money on something that's not going to happen. And I think that Richter Park Authority is here trying to prevent both the cell tower company, the Richter Park Authority, from spinning their wheels with having no possibility of advancing this. I think they just want a clear idea from the council, and I think that, you know, this goes before the council. It goes as a vote, and, you know, the council members vote their conscience of whether they want to allow Richter Park Authority to proceed with the request on this, and it will all come back before us in the end anyway, with the exact location, height, design, impact to the community. So, you know, I understand that it's kind of a vague request right now, but sometimes that's what these are, and I think that it's good that we're doing this, because I think it saves everybody a lot of time and money and effort. If the council decides they don't want to proceed with this, then it ends in July's meeting. If the council decides they want to continue with this on a vote, and I just encourage all the council people to do their homework and vote their conscience on it. So,
Les, Mr. Bidder, if we were to approve and let this move forward, after hearing what Mr. Eberhard said in the statutes that he read, or ordinances that he read, they will still have to come back before us, correct?
Yes.
Just to clarify that so that everybody understands.
And the reason for that is that the land, whatever the deed says, the land is owned by the city of Danbury. The city has the say in a lease for use of the property. So, step one, correctly said, is to determine whether the authority should proceed to negotiations, to examination of the idea of a tower at a certain location, which will come back to you, and the idea of a lease, which will come back to your council. And then, subsequent to that, there will be a decision made by the council on whether to execute a lease, what kind of a lease, where the tower would be, and of course you have the further steps of citing council at the state level and all those things. But in answering the question directly, certainly this committee and the council would have that.
Mr. Taylor,
Just, you know, my family's been here since the founding of Danbury. I can remember talking to my dad. He was born at the turn of the century. He grew up in a house that had no electricity, no plumbing, no nothing. He talks about, he's gone, but I can remember he was one of the original members of the Danbury Planning and Zoning Commission when we first consolidated the city, and before that, in the 20s with the rural electrification projects. If you look back at Danbury history, there was a huge outcry against power poles, to bring power to the place. Now, we take power poles for granted. If you actually stop and look, what's uglier than a power line? No, that's technology. I mean, all the work, all the stuff that went on with the Stanley Ruff. I live on Great Plain Road. I drive by that cell tower on Stanley Ruff 3 or 4 times a day. It fades into the background, just like the power lines fade into the background, just like windmills that people don't want fade into the background. Just because it's something new that we're not used to and everybody's opposed to it, I have a problem with that. The world moves on. The world moves on. Technology moves on. And if you look at the power lines, that if you actually stopped and looked at the power lines that are on your road in front of your house, what's uglier than that? But it becomes part of the landscape because it provides a service, it provides a higher quality of life, it provides things we all need. Cell towers, I hate the cell towers that look like a phony tree. Terrible. If you put up a cell tower, put up a cell tower, it serves the purpose. Don't try to disguise it. Serve the purpose that it's there. If we can generate money for the city, that's great. If it's a service that we all need. I had a guy who I spent hours and hours and hours on the phone with on the Payne Narrum cell tower, and he said, well, you know, call me on my home line, but don't call me out on my cell phone because I don't have service. You know, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the issue. You can't not expect to increase service, to move ahead, and to have something in your neighborhood with a cell tower. And it fades into the background. 5 years from now, nobody's going to see it.
Mr. Paul.
I have two questions. One for the Park Authority. Is the golf course a viable business entity right now?
Yes. The operations produce several $100,000, and we're investing back into the infrastructure that had been ignored for many years. We did car paths last year. 2 years before that, the bunkers were redone. There's many other projects that need to be done. The drainage we're looking to do to the greens, so we won't have the same problem with the greens that we had this year in the future. And there's several other capital improvement projects that need to be done because it was neglected for so long.
How are your numbers, players?
This year the numbers are down because of the weather. But as to past years, last year, if you remember, we had tremendous heat. The heat was just unbearable. We had the exact same number of rounds within 100 as we did the year before. The year before, if you remember, we had horrible rain. It was 44,000 plus, which was the same number as the year before, when the weather was fantastic.
So the numbers are staying about the same.
The numbers are staying the same for the year, somewhere 44,000 plus rounds each year. This year we are behind. This year we are behind.
I could also, yeah,
That do the economy.
I'm sorry.
I think partially the economy.
yeah, 45,000, 44 to 45,000 rounds, as John said, the prior 2 years. And just to give you an example, once again, Stanford, which is really the only one that's set up or in this entire area of Connecticut, they have an independent authority, very much run like we are, and they did 50,000 rounds, but they're open all year round. We're not, obviously, and yet we gross from specifically just from the golf course more revenue than they do because of our fee structure, and you know, there's only a limit because of the supply and demand is down nationwide. It was even before the economy. There was a Wall Street Journal article about 6 or 7 years ago that attributed it before the economy that it was too long a game. Everybody got caught up in Tiger Woods. Everybody thought it was an easy game. They went out and found it very frustrating, too time-consuming, and expensive. And that was even before the economy hit. And so play went down around the nation, just like Mr. Chianese said. You may read about this, but we, as John said, there's a rumor out there that we lost all this money last year. We did on paper mainly because of the cart pass of $220,000. We had to take out of what we were bringing in. So I mean, if you look at what we bring in, what we spend in the daily operation of the course, we made money, and we have been making money. But that infrastructure is over 40 years old, and I'm not talking about the building, and I'm not talking about the Richter House. I'm talking about the drainage, the pipes, the irrigation system, and there's only so much we can do. The bunkers everyone raves about, that was a very expensive project, but in order to attract golfers and pay the rates we charge, you have to be able to have and right now everybody's complaining about the greens, and the reason was that 1996 and in 2005 we had the USGA come in, and they recommended that we do drainage, which is what we now appropriated to do. And for some reason it was never done. And certainly in '96, there was money there to do it. And let it go. And so as a result, this winter, because we don't have proper drainage, one of the reasons is that when the spring came, we had heavy rains, snow, heavy rains, followed by a deep freeze, that the water puddled, you can see the swell, and it damaged all the greens. And how are we going to correct that in the long term is to do drainage. And also, we're going from, it gets very technical, we're going from what's called poana grass, which is sort of a natural grass that grows very easily, but it's very, very susceptible to cold weather. Shouldn't be used in the Northeast. And we're converting strict now to bent grass, which is expensive grass, but it has much more durable. In places like Canada, they wouldn't even touch anything without bent grass. And our superintendent was proactive when he came in, Rob Dorsch, 4 years ago, in attacking, before this problem arose, in trying to convert to bent grass. So in other words, it's an ongoing thing. It's not, and the Richter House, one of the other things to ask Mr. Chinesi's question, we never really, that was a rumor. I'm on the board, we never discussed, they might have heard rumors about it tearing it down, but we never had any official, that we knew that we floated the idea because our planner suggested it, and that did our master plan initially in some preliminary talks, because we thought it'd be so prohibitively expensive to redo it. And it was through the efforts of our general manager and who was able to get us declared the Richter House as an historic. We were originally told it had no historical value. And so now, when these master plan calls for dramatic improvements to the Richter House, with including building, which of course we'd have to come back anyhow, to build a modern facility connected to that. It would blend in architecture.
One second.
Just hold for a second.
I'm used to my old days of planning.
Our stuff, there you go.
Yeah.
We've still got the same
We still have the tape, yeah. Listen, yeah.
We've actually taped up the cord, I see, so that's...
Let me know when we're back on.
You're on.
Okay, and so we're hoping that we can build something long-term, long after I'm on this earth, that will generate income, like banquet facilities and things like that they have at other public courses or public facilities, because of having this drain. And I don't mean that negatively, but we have tried everything for it. To answer your question, we thought that would be a great way to reach out to the community in the arts and musicals. They don't generate any income to us, and as a result, and they haven't really been able to get anywhere with the arts, unfortunately. They haven't gotten anywhere. And the golfer, FOR allows you to earmark where your money. So if the golfers put any money in, you guess where they're going to earmark it to. So there's and we do have the right to go to, in the past, years ago, the city gave us a good faith and credit letter, which enabled us to get a bond from the city. The finance director didn't want to hear it. That wasn't going to happen. He said we'd never float with the council. So the only thing we can collateralize without your okay under the ordinance is our accounts receivable. So we're somewhat limited in being able to get long-term financing, but we're working on that. I don't want to say it's premature at this point, but we're on to our third or fourth bank, and we're finally getting to the point that it's going to go to underwriting, which will enable us to be able to pay down some of our debt and create new debt, but give us some working capital. But this would be a home run if we could get something like this. So that's basically summation.
And we've been proactive. This is our third season where we've enacted a dollar surcharge for the master plan. So for 2 years, we've raised $44,000 to $45,000. This will be the third year that we're doing that. And we're in the midst of creating a raffle, which we believe is going to raise $50,000. So we're trying to create ways, as Mr. Cavill said earlier, being creative, trying to come up with ways to create money that can help us deal with some of these capital improvement projects that need to be done to keep Richter Park at the level that people expect. The operations takes care of itself. It's the other things that need to be done that we need to generate funds for. And just to just follow up with what you said, the master plan, there's like a couple pieces that have to happen. One is the maintenance facility has to move. Then the 10th tee, the 10th hole changes, and then that allows us to open up the driving range. Once we open up the driving range, now we've created another source of creating revenue. I don't think we'll ever get to the point of Stanford in terms of the monies that they generate, but we certainly expect to generate maybe $100,000 to $150,000 a year from a driving range. So the cell tower would be a way for us to get to that point. And again, it was just, again, trying to think outside the box of ways that we might be able to generate funds to allow us to start that process in the master plan.
Any other council members? Yeah. You got one more.
I just wondered if I may talk to the neighbor.
Okay. All right. The procedure, just procedurally, just so you know, Mr. Beaver, normally this meeting would be limited to us speaking amongst ourselves. It's the chairman's prerogative to allow it to move on, to allow you into the conversation. So
Appreciate that.
we will let that happen, but
My
please be
question
brief
is-
and specific.
I appreciate it. Thank you. As such a close neighbor of the B site, what is your thought of this tower being across the street?
I have great concern because the data based on cell phone transmission is inconclusive to the health risks. I have 3 children, okay? I'm not against the idea. I'm very much in favor for you to generate as much revenue to make that golf course even nicer than it is, all right? My biggest concern is, without a doubt, is the location, okay? That's why we're here, okay? So,
There's a fairly decent report attached to this on just that concern. See to it that you get a copy.
yeah, I don't have a copy of that. I have 18 years of cellular and wireless experience.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know the data itself is still inconclusive, okay? So, I'm more than happy to take a look at that.
Duly noted, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Les. Les, I'm a member of an ad hoc committee that deals with parkland preservation. Councilwoman Schultz is the chair of it. We went back and forth in that ad hoc committee to try to figure out some language that would protect our different city parks. And one thing that we had Attorney Yaman did was go back and include some language that included land use. Would that particular construction of that ordinance affect the Victor Park Authority in any way once it's complete?
That's a good question. The authority is different from a city park. It's not really a city park. There's open space, but it's already been essentially authorized for certain use, which is recreational purposes. So it's not really a park in the sense of those classifications that would normally fall into parkland. We could say, just for argument's sake, we could say that because it's passive recreational or even active recreational use, we could squeeze it into that classification, and those restrictions would apply to it. But because this particular authority developed a master plan, as Tarawal has a master plan, the council has already basically said that subject to approval of the master plan, these following things will be allowed. So, you know, you may not be able to impose the same restrictions in the same way because you've already approved the master plan as opposed to an open space, piece of open space, which really is freely restrainable under whatever legal mechanisms we find. So this is an authority, so it's kind of a different creature. But it doesn't take away from the council's right to restrict the use of that property outside of this other committee we're talking about. So you really have kind of 2 bites of the apple. If we could squeeze into the parkland preservation angle, if possible, but you also have another angle, which is a simple choice. You want this site used for this purpose. So you can have 2 bites of this.
Thank you. Any other council members have any further questions? Mr. Alpern.
I believe so. As I understand it, this is really a 2-step process, right? You get a preliminary sense of the committee, of the council, which then frees you up to spend additional time and money, put together a proposal, which will come back to City Council once again. And City Council does have the authority to deny, correct?
Yes, correct.
So the strategy is we want to make sure they have enough information that they can feel reasonably certain once they make that initial judgment that they're going to follow through on it. Because the last thing you want then is to go and spend additional time and effort, come back to city council and have somebody say, well, if we had known that, I never would have voted for that. You don't want that. So it seems to me some of the major outstanding issues, location, height, health issues, and what we in the field call a view shed analysis, which is simply what's going to look like. Try to do a simulation from north, south, east, west as you look at it. What is this thing in the end going to look at? Because an awful lot of the objections are visuals. I mean, I recognize myself, but visuals as well. And if you can supply that, then hopefully when you come away from council meeting, that initial council meeting, if you do get a positive, you can feel reasonably certain that they're going to follow through. But if you don't give them a whole lot of information, well, it's not, at least some basic information, you don't want to face that risk later of them saying, well, if I had known that, I wasn't going to vote for this.
Yeah,
That's the last thing.
We're kind of in a catch-22, and because all this information would come from one of the cell phone companies or advisors that you can buy these days, or buy consultants. They don't want to do it unless because they're the ones that spend the money, and they won't do it unless they know we have the approval. So we're kind of in a catch-22. And the reason why the reason from my perspective as an attorney, and I had discussed this with Les, is because in the ordinance already it gives us the right, subject to zoning and planning on that, to construct, specifically in the ordinance it says it gives the authority the right to construct and reconstruct park facilities as authorized by law only within said park. Now, so we were able to build the restaurant, things like that, because, or do things at the golf course by going planning, environmental, and things of that nature. Because we already have the council's blessing many years ago when they adopted this ordinance. But because park facilities, I was concerned about the vagueness of where the cell phone tower, I thought it best we go this route in addition to the cell phone.
And I think that's wise. Yeah. You need to follow council's advice.
Yeah, we talked about it, which...
Learned
But it was learned council, definitely learned council. But it was specifically, but it was specifically, it was really the phone companies themselves that pushed us, because they won't touch it, because they literally said they spend hundreds of thousands.
Well, I'm not suggesting, at this stage, obviously you don't want to spend...
I guess we really need to know what more specific information you need. We could go
location, height, and by height you may not have a specific height in mind, but give us a reasonable, height. We already have information on health, which I imagine will be debated further. And
for the next 50 years.
And you can get simulations of what this thing's going to look like from different angles. And those, and without spending, much. We're not talking about that.
Mr. Creel.
I think we're maybe at a little bit of a disadvantage that Maria is not here, because Maria is the person that has spent 99.5% of the time dealing with the companies to bring us to where we are. But she did provide in the package that was sent to the committee members the locations that are proposed right now. She did include in the package what they might look like in terms of visuals. She did include a study, or I don't know what you call it, from the American Cancer Society in terms of their opinion. The one thing that I think maybe that you brought up that we don't have tonight, maybe she would have had it if she was here, is the height that is proposed. So preliminarily, I think we've dealt with...
Well, the visuals, I don't have that packet, but if I'm standing at the restaurant, what's this going to look like? If I'm standing across the street, what's that kind of thing? You put it in the context of looking at it from the distance, but not a mile away, but 100 yards, that kind of thing.
Okay, understand.
That sort of thing.
Yep. If I can, I just wanted to address a couple of things just quickly. I made 3 notes as I heard the comments and questions. compliance that the council members noted. And it's important to know at the beginning, one is that what you're being asked to do is to allow the commercial use of an authority property, city property. The authorities in charge of it, but the city property, commercial use, funding be used for the further purposes of the authority, the recreational purposes of the authority. That's what's being asked to. Commercial use by lease of authority property / city property for recreational use. The second thing to remember is if the authority for that is provided and a lease is executed to allow the use of that property, then the decision goes over to the siting council of the state of Connecticut. And at that point, much of the decision making on the tower going there is out of your control. So in other words, once you execute a lease for the property, you'll have a lot less say than you do right now in deciding not to do it at all. That's an important point to remember, because the siting council has very broad jurisdiction, as Dennis will tell you that. Dennis's department provides reports and information, and we'll get all that. Those, thank you very much. But if we feel that there's a gap in service at that location, they will put the tower there over all strenuous objections, unless you have some very strong health or national historic sites, things. There are certain exceptions that exist out there. The third point is that, and none of this is meant to be negative or positive, but the third point is that there's no guarantee that the revenue from the lease will all go to the authority. The city may decide to retain all of the revenue, the city may decide to retain part of the revenue, or they may decide to give the revenue totally over to the authority. So that's also a consideration. That's an unknown at this point. So those three factors should be borne in mind as you go through this process, because this truly is a work in progress. It takes some time to flesh out. But just to realize those, I just want you guys to know that those issues are out there. They should be noted for the record.
Mr. Cobb.
This is going to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room. If the authority were to go to a cell tower company and say, look, we're interested in maybe putting a tower here. The company says, yep, we have huge gaps in service, and we want to apply, and we're going to apply to the siting council. And could the city council be cut out of that decision process at that point by the siting council? Because I know they've done it in other places.
No, the siting council could not force the city to lease property to the authority. The authority doesn't have the authority, if you will, to override that city council authority and go to the siting council directly. And the reverse is true. The siting council has no business telling anybody that they have to lease a piece of property.
No, not that they have to, but if the authority was willing.
Couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
The authority couldn't really leap over.
Okay.
You know,
That's what I want to make sure.
Yeah, they can negotiate. They can discuss with potential cell tower providers, all day if the council authorizes it, and then come back with that package. Here's the company we like. Here's the package we like. Here's what we're proposing. Could you please deal with that? And then the siting council can involve.
Okay. But you would still need council approval. At that point, you
Yes.
Okay. That's why I just want to be clear that we don't get, because I know I've dealt with the siting council several times in my career as a councilman, and they seem to have incredible power.
Once you put your stake in the ground, and that is that the property has been leased to a company, whether it be on this site or any other site. Once you lease that property, the siting council is in charge. More or less.
But more likely, they would take the suggestions of the city council and the authority as to design, location, height.
Right. They'll take that
Probably
into-
not. They probably wouldn't come up with their own plan or design after.
They care about gaps. The siting council care about if there's no service.
I know their charge in the federal government is to provide
We went through that.
the network of cellular coverage that's uninterrupted.
You guys were all out at the site of the other one you mentioned, so
And if I could, when I'm talking about that, I have to agree with Mr. Taylor. I fought the cell phone tower vehemently on Saturday Grove Road. Vehemently fought that tower, and I drive by it 2 or 3 times a week, and I don't even see it.
You don't see it.
I don't even see it
You
anymore.
don't see it.
It's amazing. In fact, I said to somebody the other day, I caught that, and it's blended in, and I'm so used to seeing it now, I don't even see it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other council members have any questions?
We're going to need a motion to move this forward or stop it. And I'm not exactly sure where we should go. Should we add the stipulations or?
No, the only motion that we would entertain tonight, not to make it oversimplified, but is just to, what's the name of the authorize the Director Park Authority to inquire into placement of a cell tower facility at the location yet to be determined on its name. Basically, that would be the motion that we would go to.
Okay. Then, again, just to reiterate,
And so what?
we're not committing ourselves to anything.
No, then what?
Other than giving
And correct me if I'm wrong, Les, then what will spring from this is we go to our council meeting, the 21 members will vote for the same motion, or they could entertain, there could be a different motion made on that one, it appears.
There could be a modification meant to that motion, or a different motion made. You're right, whatever motion you make tonight will go to the
It's
council.
only, our motion here is a recommendation. So, and then it comes before the council makes their recommendation, and are we going to allow them to move forward?
Assuming the council takes your recommendation, that will authorize Bob and the authority is to talk to cell tower companies, examine the proposal, figure out what kind of package will come back to probably your committee or whatever the council decides, and then that'll be the next step, is to examine the package. The Planning Commission will come back in because obviously the Planning Commission from the report is pretty clear that they really didn't have anything in hand. In other words, they had no site, so they really couldn't opine on anything, right? So that's why I think they hedged their bets. They really couldn't say much. They'll be at that time also. Second part.
I would like to make it as a motion that we recognize and authorize the Park Authority to inquire the placement of such a cell tower facility at a location yet to be determined on this land.
Do I have a second? If you won't second, I'll second. So the motion's made and seconded. Any discussion amongst the three of us? It's our floor now.
Through you, I don't disagree that the Victor Park Authority probably does need a new revenue stream, but I'm a little bit concerned about some of the unknown right now, and I, at least in my opinion, feel that this needs to be vetted out a little bit more. I won't support it right now, but it's not to say that I won't in the future.
Okay. With discussion being ended, all those in favor of the motion, move forward, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nay.
Nay.
I'll now entertain a motion to close the...
Come on.
So, second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. See you in July.